Welcome everyone to the District 5 County Council Candidate Forum sponsored by the League of Women's Voters, Baltimore County, and the Randallstown NAACP. My name is Diane Aschenbrenner, and I am a volunteer with the League of Women Voters. We are pleased to present this opportunity for the voters of Baltimore County to meet the candidates and hear what they have to say about important issues facing our county. The League and NAACP are nonprofit, nonpartisan political organizations. Neither organization supports nor opposes candidates for public office, and neither supports political parties. The League's mission is to encourage informed and active participation in government, to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and to influence public policy through education and advocacy. The NAACP seeks to assure that African Americans, as well as all citizens, participate in our democracy as active and informed voters. A few housekeeping details before we begin. The forum this evening is a webinar, which means that the audience members can submit questions to the host in the chat, but cannot pose questions verbally or enable their video. Audience members will not be able to view the questions submitted by others. We invite you to submit questions via the chat, where they will be collected, vetted, and passed to the moderator. Our screener will review questions for repetition and choose for variety. Questions submitted should be appropriate for all candidates. We may not have time to address all questions submitted by the audience. During the forum, the candidates will respond to questions, but this is not a debate and time will not be provided for candidates to rebut each other's responses. Civility is expected, and candidates who behave disrespectfully, such as talking over other candidates, will be warned and may be muted. Please note that no unauthorized recordings of this forum are permitted, as its content is the property of the League of Women Voters, Baltimore County, and the Randallstown NAACP, and may not be used without permission. A recording will be available for viewing after the forum. And with that, we're ready to begin our forum tonight. This evening, our timekeeper is Stacy Morrison, our question facilitator is Nora Miller-Smith, and I will be the moderator. The Baltimore County Council is the elected legislative body, and it is vested with all lawmaking power granted by the county charter and by the General Assembly of Maryland. Tonight, we will hear from the candidates for County Council in District 5, Republican David Marks and Democrat Cyrstal Francis. The candidates will each make a 2-minute opening statement as well as a 2-minute closing statement after the question and answer period. The order of the opening statements was determined by alphabetical order of last names. Closing statement will be in reverse order from the opening statement. Timekeeper will give a verbal 30-second warning and announce when the allotted time is up. After opening statements, we'll move to questions, and each candidate will have the opportunity to respond to the same questions. Candidates will not be allowed rebuttals. We will begin with questions developed by the League of Women Voters and the Randallstown NAACP, followed by questions from the audience. Again, candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to the questions. Time limits will be strictly enforced. Timekeeper will alert the speaker when they have 30 seconds left and when time is up, at which time the speaker is asked to stop speaking within 10 seconds. Our goal is to end the forum at 7, and we appreciate everyone's help in achieving this goal. We will now have the 2-minute opening statement from each of the candidates, and Ms. Francis will begin.
Good evening. Thank you, League of Women Voters and NAACP, for hosting this forum. Also, thank you to David Marks for also participating. My name is Dr. Cyrstal Francis. I am running to become the next council person for District 5 in Baltimore County. I'm running for 2 reasons. One, because I believe it's important for women in diverse communities to continue to have a voice in Baltimore County. As many of you may know, the only woman on the council is retiring, and I'm running to ensure that women representation happens and continues to happen in Baltimore County. The second reason is because of my 15 years of public policy experience on the federal level, I have been able to learn best practices and also work in collaboration on the state level through my volunteer experience with the Maryland Alliance for Justice Reform and many advocacy organizations. And I want to use a collective impact strategy to help us solve some of our pressing issues, such as violence in our school, improved public safety, improved constituent engagement, and improved community engagement. I want to also address the housing affordability issue, substance abuse challenges, and remove neighborhood disparity. I am hoping that you would visit my website at www.cyrstalfrancis.com to learn more about my campaign and why I'm running. And I do encourage every single voter, no matter who you plan to vote for, to get out and exercise your right to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Francis. Mr. Marks, your opening remarks.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and the NAACP for organizing tonight's forum. Dr. Francis, good to see you again. By way of background, I'm a special education teacher, the father of two, and a lifelong resident of this district. I hold degrees from the University of Maryland and Johns Hopkins University and served in senior public policy positions in the state and federal governments. Across the United States, our political institutions are broken. Elected officials engage in constant partisanship. Nothing ever seems to get done. I offer bipartisanship and independence in this race. I was the president of the largest community organization in northeastern Baltimore County for nearly a decade, and that experience provided me with a can-do philosophy that is fundamental to serving as council member. I'm the candidate who proudly reaches across the partisan divide with results across this district. Working together, we've advanced 3 new schools, 2 new fire stations, and neighborhood improvements throughout the East Side. There's a reason why my campaign has been endorsed by more than 40 community organization presidents and a diverse coalition of groups who recognize my value on the county council, from the Fraternal Order of Police to the Sierra Club. They recognize we get things done. But I'm also an independent member of the county council. I've consistently opposed tax rate increases. I've said no to bad development and passed legislation that's helped preserve more than 4,000 acres of land. I've worked to cut waste from the county budget and called for the creation of Inspector General early
30 seconds.
Good government is a priority for groups like the NAACP and the League of Women Voters. Well, I was the deciding vote to pass campaign finance reform. That is what I offer, both political independence and the thoughtful, bipartisan leadership we need at all levels of government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, candidates, for both your opening statements. Mr. Marks, we will offer you the first question, and it's related to the budget. What are your priorities for the Baltimore County budget? And are there particular areas of the county that you see as a priority for these funds?
Absolutely. It's an excellent question. There are obviously many pressing needs in Baltimore County, but a few certainly rise to the top. First, public safety. Across the United States, people are concerned about law enforcement, about having safer communities. I'm very proud of my endorsement by the Fraternal Order of Police, but also by the union that represents our firefighters and paramedics. So I'm going to do whatever I can to boost the number of police positions, to increase neighborhood crime fighting strategies, and also to construct new fire stations in Middle River and Bowley's Quarters like we've been able to do in Kingsville and in White Marsh. Secondly, I'm going to continue to do what I can to improve our schools. I'm the only public school teacher on the Baltimore County Council. I understand that we need to improve the culture of school learning, but also physical facilities. I'm proud that we've advanced new schools in White Marsh and Perry Hall. Now we need to do the same elsewhere. And thirdly, I'm going to do my very best to improve infrastructure and green space throughout the 5th District, particularly in Middle River, where I've been very vocal about opposing overdevelopment at the Lafarge site and in Bowley's Quarters. A lot of these issues transcend community lines. You see the same issues in Parkton and Owings Mills and Pikesville, Perry Hall, and I'm going to do my best to be an advocate for all those communities.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. Ms. Francis?
Yes, thank you. So I believe that it is extremely important to address the root causes of many of the issues that we hear about: crime, public health. One of the things that is so important is to address the root causes of crime and ensuring that individuals who do not have access to affordable housing, education, and employment get access to the things that they need. I want to do a couple of things. One, I want to help in neighborhood disparities. Two, I want to focus on the overcrowding in schools. Three, I want to focus on reducing school violence, not by just having school resource officers, but making sure that there is necessary training for our teachers and our students on de-escalation and how to report school violence so that it's not only addressed inside the school, but that we can resolve those challenges that are coming from home. I want to also ensure that we are being a little bit innovative in how we are addressing our core curriculum, our classroom sizes, addressing post-COVID-19 maladjustment. I want to also expand our transportation infrastructure here and want to bring ideas like the circulator over to the east side of the county here in Middle River and White Marsh. Finally, I want to work on ensuring that our police department and a lot of our first responder agencies continue to do what they need to recruit diverse talent, that talent that comes directly from our communities. So I want to not only work to ensure that I'm being a great partner with our neighborhoods here in District 5, but I also want to give my commitment to ensure that we are creating equity across Baltimore County as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you both. The next question, we'll start with Ms. Francis. This is related to infrastructure. What do you think are Baltimore County's most critical infrastructure needs for the coming 4 years?
Yes, there are a couple of different. One of the ones that we hear about a lot that our residents talk about is the challenges with traffic and congestion. And yes, we see roads being paved. We don't have a lot of sidewalks here in District 5. There's not a lot of great access to public transportation methods. So I believe that we need to improve the diverse modalities of transportation so that a car is not the only way that a person can choose to travel. Solving that is going to require us to, of course, make sure that we're building bikeable, walkable communities so that it is logical to bike or walk to a neighborhood store or to a pharmacy or to a library or to a park. But I also believe it's also important to focus on our infrastructure that we don't typically see. For example, we see lots of water main breaks happening across the county, particularly in wintertime. And we also have had, and we all saw on Facebook, the challenge with the wastewater and the treatment plant over in the Dundalk area. Making sure that we're keeping up to date on our infrastructure, our maintenance, and ensuring that we aren't, waiting until the last minute for pipes to burst. We need to make sure that we're using the necessary technology to monitor our infrastructure. Finally, we do know that we are starting to get, of course, with the county executive passing the budget to provide more resources to our school systems to make sure that the schools that did not get a chance to receive funding to be rebuilt,
30 seconds.
Continuing to make sure that we're updating classrooms, getting people out of trailers, and making sure that our ventilation systems in our school systems are adequate because of COVID-19 to prevent airborne illnesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marks, what do you think are the county's most critical infrastructure needs for the next 4 years?
Well, thank you. It's an excellent question, one that I have a lot of familiarity with. I was the chief of staff at the Maryland Department of Transportation from 2003 to 2007. During that time, I actually helped start the process that led to the Towson Loop. Dr. Francis talks about circulators. I've gotten one done working with the county executive. I also worked with the Federal Highway Administration. Your question really can be summed up in a couple key points. First, we do have to continue our resurfacing. Working with the county executive, we resurfaced 7 miles of Joppa Road and other corridors. But what we were able to do with Joppa Road was we were actually able to fix the water main, replace that water main before we repaved the road. That's what we're doing in a lot of places. So we're already doing those practices. Secondly, we certainly need to address infrastructure, particularly water infrastructure. I've been a leading proponent of creating a regional water authority, something that has to be done at the state level. And thirdly, we do need to increase things like bicycling and sidewalk connections. One of my very first bills created the Baltimore County Pedestrian Bicycle Advisory Committee. But I think something that's getting lost here is the impact of overdevelopment. I have been very key in opposing overdevelopment at the Lafarge site. and at the Crane plant in Bowley's Quarters. I've also downzoned significant tracts of land in Perry Hall White Marsh to contain development. Without thoughtful development policies, traffic is going to
30
worsen.
seconds.
So I think it's really a whole blend of things. It's taking care of our core infrastructure, certainly our roads, our water system. It's dealing with alternatives to traditional transportation, things like transit where appropriate and bicycling and sidewalks, but it's also dealing with development, making sure we have a good master plan, and we are containing sprawl. All those things are important.
Thank you very much. And we'll move to our next question, which is also on infrastructure. We'll start with Mr. Marks. What steps should the county take now to protect residents from extreme weather events and long-term climate change?
Excellent question. I certainly believe that climate change is occurring, that it is occurring because of man-made influences, and that Baltimore County needs to be ahead of the curve in dealing with this. I recently completed service on the Critical Areas Commission, which is a state panel that regulates development along our critical shorelines. And this question is going to be particularly acute in places like Bowley's Quarters and Oliver Beach that are going to have rising water. First, Baltimore County has a climate action plan. I voted for that, and I look forward to implementing the recommendations. Secondly, we need to be looking at resiliency so that when we are building new developments, bulkheads and distances from the water line are being observed. Thirdly, we need to do a lot more comprehensive environmental strategies that combat climate change, looking at reforestation programs, for example, looking at land management strategies that make Baltimore County a leader, not just with climate change, but also dealing globally with environmental impacts.
Thank you very much. Ms. Francis, the question goes to you. Do you need me to repeat?
Yes, please.
What steps should the county take now to protect residents from extreme weather events and long-term climate changes?
Yes, thank you so much. So one thing I think we have to look at is how we are dealing with pollution and our waste, number one. Second, I think we should also focus on prevention and mitigation in terms of continuity of operations and ensuring that, like, for example, if we were to get a hurricane, that residents know how to protect their homes from flooding, that they have evacuation plan and process. I had the opportunity to attend there's a rural Maryland regional general meeting where they talked about a lot of the ideas that they're passing on the state level to provide more resources and funding for counties to be able to mitigate against the things that cause the rise in the tides. And but if we look at just the key driver of it, and I'm a root cause analysis individual, we have to also address how we as human beings are impacting our environment. That's making sure that we're not cutting down all of our trees. That's making sure that we are striving to reach the county's goal of net zero waste at an efficient time. That's making sure that we are looking at our carbon footprint and moving to electric vehicles, but also making sure that when we are introducing this new technology to help with climate, that we're making sure, for example, our first responders like firefighters have the resources that they need to be able to respond to vehicular accidents where they're just battery, car operated by just a battery.
30 seconds.
Talked about, if you ever seen a Tesla get in an accident and how long it takes to put that fire out, there's a specific set of resources that first responders need. So not making sure that just we have the plans in place, but making sure that we're actually funding the resources to make sure that the plan can be appropriately implemented. And that's what I hope to do if elected to the council. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. We'll move now to the next question. And Ms. Francis, it'll come to you first. It's related to safety. What steps could the county council adopt to prevent recidivism and decrease crime?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. It's actually one of my expertise. So there are a couple of different things. One, I just want to put this fact out there that the Economic Council of Advisors did some research, and they mentioned that for every dollar that we invest in reentry, making sure that people who have serve time in a correctional facility or have a criminal record can become successful, positive, productive members of society, that we reduce the tax burden of what it costs to incarcerate. And so for every dollar that we invest, we yield $5 on that investment. So just take however much it costs to incarcerate somebody to see what that return on investment is. But these are the things that help. Number one, making employment is so important. It is one of the number one things that is necessary because it's extremely hard to get a job with a criminal record, even though we do have ban the box. People are getting caught up in the background check phase. So I really want to work with our employers. I actually sit on the U.S. Attorney General for the District of Maryland, created a advisory board through the Maryland Returning Citizens Alliance, and I am the steering committee chairperson for job training. And so it's important that we encourage our employers to really adopt what we call a fair hiring process. But we can't just focus on
30 seconds.
We also have to make sure that there is access to adequate education. People have been paying attention to the news. There's a Pell Grant reinstatement, making sure that we're building partnerships to create a pipeline for employment and using our higher education organizations as a way to train people. We also have to invest in mental health to ensure that people are going to work and they have the resources that they need, and housing, because without housing, you can't have a job. Everything else will crumble. So housing, access to care, and of course, employment.
Time is up.
Thank you. Mr. Marks, what steps could the county council adopt to prevent recidivism and decrease crime?
The Baltimore County government in general can strengthen its partnership with many stakeholders, including the Maryland Department of Labor, our community colleges, and other entities that will boost the economic well-being of all citizens, particularly youth. One area where Maryland has been very innovative in the past couple of years is with apprenticeships. And I'd like to see us do whatever we can at the Baltimore County level to increase the extent of apprenticeships, particularly with our community college. We have an excellent community college system. Dr. Sandra Curtinitis is one of the leading community college presidents in the United States. They've done a terrific job of partnering with entities like Franklin Square Hospital and with Homeland Security entities to make sure that young adults are getting those type of opportunities. Globally, we need to increase employment bases like Trade Point Atlantic. Trade Point Atlantic is one of the terrific success stories of the past decade. It was perfectly positioned for when the pandemic hit, and it has been a real employment booster for all of Eastern Baltimore County. There's some other things we can do. I'm a public school teacher. I see the value of trade schools. There's been a lot of talk about building a high school in the east side that focuses on marine technology, things like that. And then we can also use transportation as a way of eliminating the spatial mismatch between where jobs are located and those who can supply those jobs. There's a lot of reverse commuting strategies that other jurisdictions are doing that can help break that spatial mismatch. And then finally, I want to talk about the importance of community centers, because we just broke ground on an important community center in Rosedale. Delegate Carl Jackson and I have been working in a bipartisan way to get a community center in places like Dunfield that need that support structure. And I'd like to see that strengthened throughout all the 5th District.
Thank you, candidates, for those remarks. Our next question is, starting with Mr. Marks, we'll start this time. In Baltimore County, a number of communities currently face food deserts and thousands of residents face food insecurity. How will you work to resolve these situations?
That's an excellent question. And the issue of receiving proper nutrition resonates throughout Baltimore County. Baltimore County has a terrific number of students that receive free and reduced priced meals. But there's many students who go to campus every day and they don't have breakfasts. I was the only Republican on the county council to support creating a pilot program to look at nutrition access, and that has really expanded over the past few years. We also need to increase our partnerships with groups like the Student Support Network, which has done a terrific job of providing not only just free food, but other resources to students. Finally, we need to use our zoning and development tools to encourage grocery stores to relocate in communities where there are insufficient opportunities. The most important tool a county council member has is rezoning. I think I've used my power over zoning very thoughtfully, and I'm going to do so particularly in places like Essex and Middle River, where you don't have the type of quality food stores that many people would like.
Thank you. Ms. Francis, how will you work to resolve the situation of food deserts and food insecurity?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. So a couple of different things. One, we have to look at what grocery store owners look at in terms of the decision that they make to bring a grocery store. So they look at a couple of different things. They look at the population, the aggregate number of population. They look at the median household income. And then they look at the competitors that surround them. There are some grocery stores that will not move to a certain area unless there are certain other stores that align with it. Like, for example, Chick-fil-A and Starbucks and Wegmans only move into certain areas based on the aggregate number of population and the median gross income. So in order to solve the food desert challenge particularly, there needs to be a number of things. One, we can utilize what I would like to see expanded, what we call access to farmers markets to bring the produce. So I think the very different, my ideas are going to be a little bit different because I believe that we should be bringing the resources to the community instead of having the community find a way to get to the resources. Again, transportation plays a significant role in this. If there here in Middle River and White Marsh, there is no adequate public transportation. So people are relying on Instacart and DoorDash. If you look also in Essex or in Dundalk, you will see lots of these vacant shopping centers that have lots of liquor stores and lots of gas stations.
30 seconds.
There aren't grocery stores. So I think to immediately address the challenge, we need to bring the resource to the community. I applaud the county for the free reduced lunch and then also during COVID-19 expanding that. But the challenge is there are some family members who aren't enrolled in school that don't have access to that food because they themselves are not a student. So I believe in ensuring that the whole family unit is served. And so I want to make sure that we're bringing those resources. I want to leverage our farmers markets. Richard's Farm is a great way to develop a partnership to figure out a way to mobilize how to get that food into the communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next question is about housing. And we will start with Ms. Francis. What are your plans for improving the availability of affordable housing?
Yes, so there are a couple of different challenges with housing affordability. One, there is limited space. And of course, here on this side of the county, primarily where there's a high concentration of rental apartments, community members don't want to see trees going down and apartment buildings going up. The problem is we don't have enough housing stock in that term. I think we need to be innovative in our approach. Number one, we have to address the root cause, and the root cause is affordability itself. We need to make sure that people who are working aren't using 70 to 80% of their income just to afford to pay for housing. So I want to make sure that we're providing resources to help people tackle debt. I know what it's like to have student loan debt. And so a lot of people, such as school teachers, may be working a job and they can't afford assistance because they are having gainful employment and they themselves are at risk of becoming housing insecure because rent is so high. The second thing that I want to look at is ensuring a way to be a little more innovative, such as allowing accessory housing units and tiny homes. So that people are who do want to own a home, but maybe they can't afford a $400,000 or $300,000 or $250,000 mortgage because they do have significant student loan debt, can have a pathway to home ownership. So expanding home ownership is one way, but also making
30
sure
seconds.
While we are building, because we do have to build, because the reason why rent is so high is because supply and demand. And when there's a shortage, the rate goes up. I also think we should leverage the independent housing stock for homeowners who may have more than one home. Maybe they want to rent it out, making sure that there are incentives for people who own more than one home to rent at affordable rates, and also providing people access to a different kind of community, not necessarily communities where there are all
Time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marks, what are your plans for improving the availability of affordable housing?
Thank you very much. As you all may know, Baltimore County entered into an agreement with several advocates for affordable housing that requires the county to construct 1,000 new units. And the county has made some progress toward that goal. In fact, since 2018, the county has seen about a 79% increase in the number of multifamily units. Additionally, Baltimore County has a work group that has recommended some recommendations that should be considered by the Planning Board and the County Council. For example, one recommendation would allow multifamily developments to be built in select commercial and industrial zones. Right now, those zones typically prohibit residential uses, and this type of proposal would allow for more mixed-use development. There's other recommendations I strongly oppose. I will not support, for example, eliminating the DR1 and DR2 zoning classifications that are protecting a lot of our waterways and open space. And I will not support expanding the urban-rural demarcation line that protects our rural north. One of the things that frustrates me is that sometimes advocates don't have the comprehensive view. For example, the Dunfield community received a number of affordable housing units without those support structures being required. So that community has no recreational space for all the families that have moved in there. And that was really a poor decision. That's why Delegate Carl Jackson and I are
30
working to get a
seconds.
community center built. Additionally, it doesn't make sense for me to be spreading affordable housing into communities that are already oversaturated with affordable housing and to not look holistically at where you're putting that housing. Good example, the Red Maple Place project in Towson, which I opposed, which will be built in historically one of the poorest parts of Towson. So I think we need to look holistically, we need to try to find consensus, and we need to do our best to meet that agreement in a very thoughtful way.
Thank you very much. And we'll stick with you, Mr. Marks, for the next question. Still also on housing, how would you encourage first-time home ownership, especially for minority county residents?
Well, I think one of the things you can do is to make housing as affordable and attractive as possible. I certainly would like to see our property tax rate be maintained low or lowered. I would like to see us increase our incentives and with other stakeholders. Other counties have had programs where they partner with police and firefighters and other groups to offer discounts for those who want to move into those communities. The county's goal should not just be providing more rental communities. The goal should be home ownership, and that's going to be something that I'm going to pursue in my next term as a council member.
Thank you. Ms. Francis, how would you encourage first-time home ownership?
Yes, so a couple of different things. I think we should continue to partner with our banks. For example, SunTrust Bank had, and even Bank of America had programs where first-time home buyers can come, learn how to save, learn how to create a fiscally responsible personal budget to be able to afford things such, not just the home itself, but preparing for emergencies and repairs. And they offer sometimes matching for the down payment, which is significantly important. I also think it's very important that we continue to provide resources to help people who want to become homeowners get a handle on their debt, because that plays a significant, your credit score plays a significant role in a person being able to even get the funding needed to even purchase a home. So there is actually a campaign called the $1 Billion Debt Pay Down Challenge. So if you're not aware of that, please Google that. It is a free resource that's being offered by a lot of the faith-based organizations to help people learn how to get a handle on their debt so that they can afford to become homeowners. The second thing is for our renters, there are lots of other incentives that could be provided to make renting a little more affordable. The Rhino philosophy, where
30 seconds.
Don't necessarily have to pay their security deposits up front, but they can use that small payments over the course of a long time. are things that I think are really important and have been helpful in people maintaining and being able to afford to live somewhere. And then finally, I think it's very important that we start doing financial literacy education in our school system, so people are learning earlier of how they need to set up their own personal financial structure so that they can become,
Time's up.
whether or not they want to rent or buy a home. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question in that's about older adults. What would be, we'll start with Ms. Francis. What would be your plan to improve services for older adults?
Yes. So I spent a significant period of my career working at the United States Social Security Administration, serving our seniors. One of the things that I think is very important is actually one of the things that I hear about all the time. Everything is online. People don't pick up the phone. So a lot of our seniors have just been trying to access just the basic government services after they retire, and not being able to get a live human oftentimes. I was able to partner with our library system to develop a training program called Bridging the Gap for the Digital Divide for our seniors, which was a reverse mentorship program where millennials like myself had an opportunity to help tech up some of our seniors so that they learn how to utilize the internet and things of that nature. Another thing that I think is very important, which I love the fact that the county has the No Senior Eats Alone, but I think we should also figure out a way to leverage the wealth of knowledge from our senior population. Third, I think transportation, again, is another issue. I know I have oftentimes driven a senior to the poll that didn't have access to transportation or offered to go grocery shopping for them because they didn't want to get on the bus and
30 seconds.
a bunch of groceries. So I feel like we just need to put an infrastructure and resource in place where primarily seniors who don't necessarily have their children still around, have a place to thrive and survive. And if we continue to do the walkable, bikeable, concept, I think that will help solve some of the connectivity issues. But again, and last but not least, the synthetic identity fraud challenge. There's a target on our seniors to steal their identities. That was also something that I worked
Time's up.
Social Security Administration. So making sure that we're bringing those resources from the federal level and sharing them down. Thank you. You're on mute. Sorry.
Oh. Are you ready? Okay, thank you. Another excellent question. 25% of Baltimore County's population is senior citizen, and Baltimore County has one of the highest proportions of senior citizens. In fact, I think only second to Miami-Dade County, Florida. Many people moved here in the 1950s and never left. And I think there's a number of things we can do to make sure that they have an enriched life for the rest of their lives. First of all, development policies. I have helped advance 3 new senior communities in my district, and 4 others are in the pipeline. Many senior citizens constantly complain to me that they have nowhere to go in Baltimore County, so they have to move to Harford County away from their children and grandchildren. And we've helped get compromises with our community associations so that senior communities are being built. Places like the Gerst Farm, Brightview Perry Hall, Brightview Towson. So those are important. Secondly, I certainly agree that transportation is a key element of this. Again, I led the way for the Towson Loop. I'm certainly open to replicating that service in other parts of the county. I've also been a key supporter of the Northeast Trail, which is a pathway that's going to connect Overlea to Perry Hall. And then thirdly, we need to increase partnerships. And at places like Seven Oaks Senior Center, which often works with the elementary school next door, we have to make sure that the senior centers have the parking and the resources and the employees that they need. I've often thought that we need a new senior center in the Honeygo area, particularly along Honeygo Boulevard. And that's something that we need to work on in conjunction with the Department of Aging. I do agree with Dr. Francis about the need for a hotline. Every day my office deals with concerns from senior citizens, and that sort of coordinated effort would certainly be a distinct improvement.
Diane, you're muted. Unfortunately, Diane, you're still muted. There you go.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It should get me off of mute when I hold the space bar down temporarily, and it didn't do it this time. So sorry about that. We'll stay with you, Mr. Marks. What proposals could the county council offer to help the homeless population?
Excellent question. I've had firsthand experience dealing with this as a council member, particularly in the Towson area, where you do not have a convenient homeless shelter like we do in the eastern part of the county. So I certainly would be supportive of trying to find land in the central part of the county so that we have shelters on the west, central, and eastern sides of the county. I'm particularly concerned about the number of homeless students in our schools, which continues to escalate. And I see this firsthand as a public school teacher in Harford County. The number of children who do not have the same access as other students to education and to other aspects of life. You know, the federal government requires through the McKinney-Vento Act that they have that access, but local government sometimes doesn't meet the challenge. Ultimately, the more that you improve the livelihood of parents and guardians, the better conditions are going to be for our children. So it's really an issue of expanding your employment base, having more job training partnerships, increasing the linkages between where jobs are and employees are, and having this whole comprehensive approach to lifting people out of poverty, not just giving people shelters and meals, but really genuinely improving their lives.
Thank you very much. Ms. Crystal, what proposals could the county council offer to help the homeless population in your perspective?
Yes. So one of the things I think is extremely important. I am a qualitative researcher, and one of the things that I am able to do when state, federal, or local government is looking for a policy resolution and they have the data and numbers, I help tell the stories behind those numbers. So first we have to look at who is homeless in Baltimore County. And this is not just an issue that is, unique here, it's across the nation. Our returning citizens, individuals that have criminal records because it's hard for them to find housing, primarily individuals who are on the registry because they have committed a sex offense. Individuals who are battling substance abuse and haven't, or any type of mental illness, that they have not been appropriately connected to the proper care. This also includes children who have disabilities that have aged out of the system and their parents are no longer there to care for them. Our seniors and individuals who are unable to maintain gainful employment. Now, our homeless shelters are extremely important, but I can tell you from dealing with the population directly, there are resources that exist and a lot of them cannot connect because there is a logical policy barrier. Oftentimes, in order for somebody to apply for any type of support or resources, they have to have an address. If I'm homeless, I do not have an address. They have to have an ID to prove who they are. A lot of times when you're homeless, all your important identity documents are not on your person.
30 seconds.
Another challenge. So this is why I think collective impact is so important, because we need to involve not only the local agencies, but we have to involve our state and federal agencies working together to develop partnerships. Finally, I'll say this. The Catholic Charities has an amazing program that they operate in DC with a voucher program to help people who are homeless get emergency hotel housing so they're not sleeping on the street. We do that sometimes in the wintertime, but they do it 365 days because they know that when someone is sleeping on the street, the battle between eating a hot meal, they may commit a crime because some people would rather, they call it 3 hots in a cot. They either serve time in prison because they know they're going to get a warm bed and 3 hot meals. And so I think we need to work collectively together to tackle this problem with our nonprofits. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Last question, and we'll start with Ms. Francis. If you could make any change you wanted to improve the quality of life in District 5, what would that be?
Removing neighborhood disparity. So what do I mean by that? I mean that your future trajectory and success should not be dictated by your zip code or by the neighborhood that you grew up in. So let me explain a little further. It's really important. Education is, to me, is the key to getting out of poverty. I can tell you, because I grew up in a household with 2 United States Army veterans. My mom was a disabled Army vet. She only made enough just to pay rent. And so at a young age, at 14, I was considered a breadwinner because I was working and bringing income into the household. But I used my education to help pull my family out of poverty. And, I went to college, I got my bachelor's degree, my master's degree, my PhD, and then I'm using all this education that I have to create policy change, things that are structural. They're just structural challenges, just the way that government operates as a whole. So I want to remove neighborhood disparity, because if you look at, and we hear this all the time, and this isn't really pertaining to any district, I believe we should address neighborhood disparity across the county. It happens here in Middle River. It happens in Dundalk and in Essex and in parts of the West Side. But when we look at how our schools are funded, and just like community collaboration, participation,
30 seconds.
Neighborhoods that are included versus the neighborhoods that are not, it's oftentimes the more affluent neighborhoods that have the best of everything, the best resources, the best schools, the best community centers, when the neighborhoods that do not have or they're living under the poverty line don't have access to. So I want to look at holistically across the county, all of the disparities across the neighborhoods, and bring those neighborhoods that don't have up to the level of the neighborhoods that do have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Marks, if you could make any change you wanted, what would be the one thing you would do to improve quality of life in your district?
Well, one of the most fundamental things that we can do is to have a thoughtful master plan that guides development appropriately throughout our district. The 5th district is a unique district. It has dynamic neighborhoods from Kingsville to Middle River. I know, because I've been a community activist for 30 years, I've worked with a lot of the community leaders, and having a good master plan that directs capital investment and development decisions appropriately is so key. Fortunately, the next council member is going to have an opportunity to vote on a new master plan and to make rezoning decisions. We need to make sure that Kingsville retains its rural character. We need to make sure that in the Honeygo area of Perry Hall, we thoughtfully develop our last frontier of growth. But we also take care of older neighborhoods like Perry Hall. And in the new part of the district that I don't currently represent, I want to bring a very thoughtful approach to zoning and development. It's why I've been so outspoken against overdeveloping the Lafarge property. It's why I've helped lead the community in opposing overdevelopment at the Crane plant in Bowley's Quarters. The East Side has tremendous potential. It's got beautiful waterways, it's got diverse, dynamic neighborhoods, but it needs a thoughtful master plan that guides development and also makes the appropriate capital investments. Things like making sure that we have 2 new fire stations in Bowley's Quarters and Middle River. We get a new library built in Essex. We get a new senior center built in the north. We get road resurfacing and transportation connections, and we look at the future of White Marsh Mall. So if I could do anything, it would be something that the next council member is going to be able to do, which is to implement a thoughtful, strong master plan that guides capital investments and makes sure that we have a sustainable future.
Thank you, candidates, for your answers to these questions. We're going to move out of the question and answer program now and move to your closing statements. And Mr. Marks, you have the first closing statement.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and the NAACP for hosting this forum. I've worked on a number of initiatives with groups like yours that have improved good government. And Dr. Francis, thank you for coming as well. There are 2 candidates in this race with different backgrounds and approaches on how they would govern. And I'd like to respectfully point out 3 ways in which I believe I'm the better choice. First, experience. I'm a lifelong resident of this district whose children attended Baltimore County Public Schools. I'm the first special education teacher ever to sit on the county council and the only public school teacher serving right now. Professionally, I've worked in senior public policy roles at the local and state governments, but I've never forgotten my local roots. I was a community leader for 15 years before running for office. Second, bipartisanship. There's a reason why I've been endorsed by 30 community leaders from Kingsville to Middle River and by groups as diverse as the Fraternal Order of Police, the AFL-CIO, and the Sierra Club. They know that I reach across party lines. Third, independence. On issue after issue, I've never hesitated to say no to higher taxes, wasteful spending, bad development. I sponsored the legislation that required developers to pay impact fees. I've opposed overdevelopment at the Crane plant and Lafarge property. You hear a lot about the need for diversity on the council. The fact of the matter is that you need independent thought on the county council as well. We're not well served by a monopoly board with 7
30
seats
seconds.
that are all controlled by one political party. Experience, bipartisanship, and independence matter. It's the blend of qualities that make a good council member. I thank you for your support and consideration, and I look forward to representing the new East Side 5th District on the Baltimore County Council.
Thank you for your closing statement, Mr. Marks. Ms. Francis, your closing statement.
Thank you. So first, I want to just acknowledge the fact that all of the hard work of the NAACP, the ACLU, and also the League of Women Voters is the reason why I jumped into this race to ensure that women in diverse communities have a voice at the table. You know, diversity of partisan diversity is so important, but I believe that when every council person takes that oath, they dropped their political title and really focus on just working on behalf of the constituents. Every public servant has to take the oath to uphold that. One of the things I think is so important is that we have a woman's voice on the council. We will wake up on November the 9th, not having women on the council would take us all the way back to 1956, which I believe would be a sad shame. But not just that, you know, there has never been an African-American woman ever elected to the Baltimore County Council. So not only will we be ensuring that there is diversity, gender diversity, ethnic diversity, but I am also 37 years old, and I believe I would also be one of the youngest ones serving on the council. I think it's time that we elect leaders that have the lived experience for many of the challenges that we're hoping to solve, that we elect a leader that has done the research on the best practices that
30
federal,
seconds.
state, and local governments have implemented. You know, I've served on lots of different boards, lots of different nonprofits. I've done research on lots of different policy resolutions that have been passed. And I believe that it is so important that we continue to engage our young people, that we continue to make it easier for people to vote. And I am going to make sure that if I am elected, that I am improving the opportunity index for you and your family.
Time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much. And thank you, audience, for joining us tonight. Thank you to our candidates for participating in the forum and serving as an example of civil discourse. You've given Baltimore County residents a great deal to think about when we vote in November. I'd also like to thank the Forum Committee for arranging this event and the League of Women Voters Baltimore County and NAACP of Randallstown for co-sponsoring the forum. In the next few days, recordings of this forum will be available on the League's website and the League's YouTube channel. General Elections Day is November 8, 2022. Early voting begins October 27 and ends on November 3rd at 8 p.m. Vote411.org is the League of Women Voters free online voters guide, your one-stop shopping site for everything about your local ballot, candidate positions in their own words, polling places, and more. Hard copies of the League's voters guides are available at branches of the Baltimore County Public Library, senior centers, Head Start centers, and college campuses. We hope that you'll reconsider joining or donating to the League of Women Voters of Baltimore County and the Randallstown NAACP to help support our work. Thank you all again for coming, and good night.
Thank you very much.
Good night. All right, take care.